were really worried about people's health. They wouldn't have asked the Germans to go door to door during the Nazi regime. They're operating not as a church or a religious organization, their entity. They're operating as a business or some ungodly form entity that is not a religious entity.
Hello, Jesse.
Jesse,
Hey, what's up?
Hey, just wanted to talk about that subject. We're talking about the KingDumb Halls being closed.
Yeah, I got some private messages, and people want me to address that point. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses and ex-Jehovah's Witnesses want to know, why are the KingDumb Halls still closed after all these months?
It's over a year now, I believe, because it was just 15 days to flatten the curve. It's turned into years, and you even hear some government officials talk about years now. You're going to have a lot of people in your comment section give you different reasons why the KingDumb Halls are closed. And I really think all of them, they're very good points. The witnesses, for example, they do a lot of virtue signaling. And when I talk to them, when I talk to them on Facebook or when I talk to them in the local community, why are you guys still closed? And they always talk about how they virtue signal. They say, well, we're still doing it by the phone. This is a pandemic. Basically, they're big chickens. Their whole organization is a chicken. They're scared, and they're virtue signaling, They're saying that they're protecting the community. They're protecting their followers by staying at home. And so what I'm thinking is, if you do a list, all the comments, and maybe invite your listeners to give the reason, there'll be literally hundreds and hundreds of different reasons why the KingDumb Halls are closed. One by Watchtower and by all the apostates and by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Everybody has a reason. We speculate. But I really think there's an easy answer. And I think me and you have talked about it. In your video, you keep talking about this, listen. How do you explain that? Listen, be good listeners. How did you explain that on your last video?
Well, Jesus said, Luke 8:18, he says, so be careful how you listen, for whoever has, to him more will be given, and whoever does not have, even what he thinks he has will be taken away from him. So Jesus is talking to you. He's throwing pearls of wisdom, and he's telling you, be careful how you listen. And not just to him, but to everybody else around you.
If you listen to what's going on in the world today with the association, in the United States Constitution, one of the first things we have is freedom of association. We have freedom of religion. And it's funny, it's a coincidence that Jehovah's Witnesses have chosen not to associate physically. They're calling it association electronically, but traditionally, association meant physically, face to face. The first century churches were at the homes, and in about the 3rd and 4th century, they became churches, buildings owned by the church outright. But still, the tradition was face to face association. Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to change that. They're trying to tell us that Zoom is an association. And who else in the world is doing that?
A lot of people are doing it. Doctors, teachers, so forth.
Exactly, like our doctor, our family doctor. He wouldn't see us, because if they're telling you that they're afraid to even see us. Viruses have been around since the beginning of time. Doctors have treated their patients face to face. So what I'm thinking, like you said, listen. Watchtower is telling us that they're an organization. I really think it's a complex question with an easy answer. They're not a religious entity. They're not, and I don't like to use that word organization. They're not a religious entity like a Islamic mosque would be, a Jewish synagogue, a Catholic church or a Protestant church, or a house of worship, somebody's house, a Bible study. They're not a religion in that sense. Now, I don't want to insult any Jehovah's Witnesses because they believe that they are a religious entity, and that's fine. They probably feel that way. But if you listen to your leaders, they keep using the word organization. They're an organization. Like in Spanish, we used to learn about the ONU, Organización de Naciones Unidas, the United Nations organization. The United Nations doesn't call themselves a church. They specifically call themselves an organization. They want to separate themselves from churches. I really think the Watchtower is a corporation, and they're acting acting like a corporation. They understand that churches in the lockdown in the future are going to be seen as non-essential, so they're fixing it right now. They're operating not as a church or a religious organization, their entity. They're operating as a business or some ungodly form entity. That is not a religious entity. They're not a church.
They'll call themselves an organization, but when it comes to taxes, then they'll whip out the religious card. Only when it comes to taxes. But check this out. In any, whether you're an organization, whether you're a church, whether you're just an individual, we all want to make somebody happy. So you want to make your spouse happy. You want to make, right? If you're a church, you want to make God happy. If you're an organization, you want to make somebody happy. And who is Watchtower trying to make happy? Well, they're definitely not trying to make the Jehovah's Witness faithful happy, because they're not letting them go to the KingDumb Hall that they built and they paid for. Watchtower is trying to make somebody happy, kind of like the Chinese have a social credit score. They have a social score, and if you have a good social score, you make the government happy, and then you're allowed privileges. So Watchtower is also, in my opinion, looking for privileges amongst the organizations that they're associated with, and they're trying to make them happy because their actions show, hey, let's not make the people, our publishers and elders and ministerial servants and pioneers happy. They're appeasing somebody else, and it's part of their social score, is my opinion.
Yeah, or they're trying to curry favor, or they're virtue signaling to World Health Organization or the CDC or some kind of political organization or political groups or governmental organizations that they are in compliance. Because the Jehovah's Witness history in the 20th century, in our lifetime, is a religion of non-compliance. They didn't stand up for the pledge. They didn't comply with any religion. I mean, with any political group. So now, in the end, they're the biggest kiss butt organization to the World Health Organization.
Correct. Now, this is interesting because Jesus addressed this. He goes, Matthew 6:21 in the Sermon on the Mount, he goes, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So look at the school teachers. We have two sets of school teachers in America. We have one group of teachers that will not go back to work because they want to be faithful to their union. Their loyalty is not with the children, it's with the union, and they have to toe the union line and stay home, collect your paycheck, and do your schooling and your teaching via Zoom. Whereas the other set of teachers are saying, no, let's go back to the classroom, because their heart is with the children. So for where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. So same thing with Watchtower. Watchtower's heart is not at the KingDumb Hall having meetings with the people. Their heart, their treasure is somewhere else. And it's evident by what, what they're doing with their properties. They're actually closing their properties, and they're showing the New World Order. They're showing them, hey, look, here's my treasure. I'm giving it to you. I'm not giving it to the faithful witnesses. No, they're giving their loyalty, and some would say they're giving their loyalty to the and their treasure to the mark of the beast.
Right. So what's happening? There's two things that are happening. A house divided cannot stand.
Correct.
Let's say you're an old lady and an old sister. Think of your mom. Think of my mom. That's all you have is the meeting. All you have is the meetings and field service. Pre-COVID. You give your life to going out in field service, and then you go to lunch, you go to Starbucks, and you hang around with the congregation. During COVID and now, you have none of that. You have absolutely no physical contact. It's all electronically. Now, those Jehovah's Witnesses are suffering depression big time. The Jehovah's Witness elders, the leaders, and the ministerial servants, they love it. They love it because they're a bunch of lazy asses. And me and you serve as elders. Mark loves it here in Yuma. That, I don't know, Paul might be in depression, but Mark, the Kobe, the city overseer, he loves it because he's a lazy ass. Danny, you went out service with him. He drove around the cars to make sure everybody else was in the territory. All the elders love it because they don't have to work. But the brothers, the Jehovah's Witnesses who did the physical work, the older brothers, the ones who were faithful and going door to door and doing all the physical work, oh man, they're suffering. They're in big time depression.
Now let's talk about another point. There's old Jehovah's Witnesses and younger Jehovah's Witnesses as far as the time that they have in the KingDumb Hall. So if you're an older Jehovah's Witness, you've been in the hall, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 plus years, you know that there's a group of witnesses who they never let their kids go to school, like our sister-in-law. Why? Because my sister-in-law didn't want the kids to get vaccinated, so the kids were homeschooled. So a lot of you people who are watching this video, there was a lot of kids that were homeschooled. It's because they were old school Jehovah's Witnesses. And in the old religion, vaccination was completely forbidden. And so now Watchtower, instead of addressing the most, like you say, the most consequential decision of our lifetime, Watchtower is silent. So the reason the KingDumb Halls are closed is because you're going to have two groups of Jehovah's Witnesses going to the hall. The old school and the new school, and they don't agree.
Divided cannot stand. A house divided cannot stand. If the Jehovah's Witnesses were to go to the KingDumb Hall, Watchtower knows. They've studied this. We know it. That you would have two groups of people, kind of like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, kind of like the Republicans and the Democrats. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses kind of like to say that they're united in one thought. Jehovah's people, no, they're not. The vaccine divides that congregation like the what's that fault, like the San Andreas fault, and it is a big division in that congregation.
Yeah. Now let me just add to that real quick. The publication, it was a video. It was from a convention. It was called United by Divine Teaching. So Jehovah's Witnesses taught you via DVD and the convention, United by Divine Teaching Convention. But there is no divine teaching when it comes to the most consequential issue of our day. Should you or should you not take the vaccine? Well, don't ask me.
No,
but you
Jehovah's
would.
skips class when it comes to the vaccine.
So Jehovah, the God of Watchtower, has skipped class, and he gives no divine teaching as to which way to go. I'm not going to tell people what to do because I'm not an expert in this matter. However, the publication, and we all know it, we all remember it, United by Divine Teaching. So, one, there is no divine teaching. Jehovah's absent, number two, and they're not united. So if you put them all in the KingDumb Hall, what is everyone talking about in 2021? And they're not going to be united, you see?
They're not going to be talking about it. Listen, every little kid knows it. He asks Mommy, can I take a Valentine to school? Well, what does Jehovah have to say about that? Or, Mommy, can I take a Christmas gift? The kids are going to do Christmas, Secret Santa. What does Jehovah have to say? For 100 years, the Jehovah's Witnesses have blasphemed on God's name. They have said over and over. Well, you remember our nephew when he was in an airplane, and he goes, "Where are we at? We're up in the sky. Are we with Jehovah?" They have used God's name for everything. Now, the most consequential question maybe in mankind's history, the Jehovah has nothing to say about it.
Correct. So here we go. The vaccine and the mask. Whether or not, yay or nay, it's a political issue. So Jehovah's Witnesses says, we're not political. Well, you have to keep everybody at home because if you send them all to the KingDumb Hall, they're all going to come out of the closet, and then you're going to find out, guess what? Every single last damn human being that's alive is political. And every human being has an opinion.
Every action that Watchtower has taken during this COVID has sided with the left, the communist left, the Marxism. And that's not by coincidence. Everything of consequence during this pandemic, Jehovah has sided with leftism, with communism and Marxism. The lockdowns, the face masks, everything. They side with Marxism. Remember like Kevin Costner had the movie Dances with Wolves? Jehovah's Witnesses side with Marxism on everything. On saying freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association. Jehovah's Witnesses always side with communists. So you can't say that the Jehovah's Witnesses are a politically neutral organization. And that's why the KingDumb Halls must stay closed. Because you're going to get somebody arguing these things at the KingDumb Hall. That's what happens when you have freedom of association. People exchange ideas. Watchtower doesn't want that. It's too dangerous. Everybody has to conform. The best way to conform is keep them at home. keep the KingDumb Halls closed.
Right. That's true. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what it is. You can't have Jehovah's Witnesses go to the KingDumb Hall because the vaccine is going to prove that you're not divided, or the mask, but either one is going to prove that you're not divided by divine teaching and that Jehovah is absent. He is absent. And someone's, you know what someone's going to say?
Jehovah Watchtower. I like to say Jehovah Watchtower.
Yeah. Now listen, I want to go over one other thing, a few other things, real quick. When we were kids, we'd go to KingDumb Hall, and they would always say that Paradise Earth was the Nuevo Orden. There was a great comment in my last video that the girl said, L.A. Polly, I think she said that when you go to the KingDumb Hall, they refer to Paradise Earth as the New Order. But everybody started getting wise to the New World Order. And they changed it. So do you remember growing up that they would always use the phrase the new El Nuevo Orden?
I left in 2013, but in the Spanish, I would say the majority of the brothers would say El Nuevo Orden, El Nuevo Orden. Yeah, that was a very extremely common phrase in the Spanish, the New Order. Correct.
So if you're in the English congregation, it's like if you're in the KingDumb Hall and somebody says, "Did you do any return visits?" And then another sister would say, "I did some back calls." The people that used the phrase back calls were jDubs from a long time ago, from the 70s, 60s, right? 60s, 70s, and early 80s. They did back calls. And then the new batch of witnesses did return visits. Same thing. That's how you knew who was the old-timer in the religion. And the old-timers would use the phrase the New Order. And it conveniently was removed. And also, at that same time frame, they were telling us at the assemblies, I remember, that we have to drop the word society and start using the word organization.
Do you remember that dog? His name is Comics the Insult Dog?
Yeah.
And he would go around to the Star Wars and the Star Trek conventions, and he would call them super nerds.
Yeah.
That's what the Jehovah's Witnesses were back in the 60s, 50s, and 70s. They were full of these Brother Rutherford-looking guys, Noor-looking guys. Yuma had them too, and our town had them. They were older white guys. They were super nerds. They weren't even allowed. They were all anointed. They all knew everything. We were at dinner one time when we were kids, remember? And I started singing that Willie Nelson song. I was just nervously impatient, and I sang that Julio Iglesias, Willie Nelson song to all the girls I once. And that Brother Dover, the one my brother had relations with, the one he loves, Brother Marion Dover.
Yeah.
He was probably like 50 or 60 years old, and he went apeshit on my ass. That's these brothers in the English, the Jehovah's Witnesses, have nothing in common with these new generations. We have the hindsight, so we get to see 50 years back of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we're seeing the future of the Jehovah's Witnesses. These new kids from Africa, these new kids from Spain, Spanish congregations, the Latin America, they don't know shit about the foundation of the Jehovah's Witnesses. They don't know nobody. Nobody in Yuma knows that Brother Dover was alive. He was one of the first brothers. They don't know how he was a super nerd. Every door he knocked in Yuma, the world would never know that he even existed.
Yeah.
If Jehovah had a witness, if that was his witness, he should ask for a new trial.
Exactly. So just think about that. All of the people that you knew that were Jehovah's Witnesses, heavy hitters, when you were growing up, there is no recollection of them. Nobody remembers them. You do.
Nobody remembers them.
Yeah.
And so Watchtower, this is why, going back to the KingDumb Halls, they can't have those brothers that are maybe 60 or 70 years old talking to these new kids.
Correct.
Because a lot of those old ones were pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine.
Correct.
Anti-transfusions. They couldn't even have organ transfusions back then.
They couldn't have organ transfusions.
They couldn't have no transfusions back then. Or blood. There was a lot of people that died. And so now, let's say you put them in a KingDumb Hall, and you're talking about all these things happening in the pandemic. You're going to have some fist fights.
Correct. Because if Brother Henshaw, the president, after France was here, they would shut him up like Joe Biden says, shut the hell up, because Brother Henshaw's going to go up on stage, and he's the one that says that organ transplant is cannibalism. The president of the Watchtower Bible Tract Society is saying that organ transplants are cannibalism. So if he were alive today, they would say, shut the fuck up, you're senile, just like the United States president. You know,
Right.
and
Listen.
yeah.
In the first century, Christians met at homes. Second century, third century.
Mm-hmm.
Constantine changed it around the fourth century,
Mm-hmm.
third or fourth century. They started going to churches.
Mm-hmm.
But even during the first two millennia, up to 1000 AD to 2000 AD, Christians have always met personally. Jehovah's Witnesses are very bold in that they want to meet electronically.
Correct.
This is not of inconsequence. This
No.
is huge.
This is huge.
This is Armageddon shit. This
Correct.
is Great Tribulation shit. We're talking about some major changes. What Jehovah's Witnesses will have you do is beyond 2,000 years of recorded Christian conduct. Follow me what I'm saying here. 2,000 years of Christian meeting face to face and debating and arguing. They used to use the word argue or debate.
Okay.
I believe the word is argue. And they would argue their points, which we would translate that as to debate. But they met face to face. Jehovah's Witnesses will have changed that tradition of the first century Christians to the 2,000 years of Christian history to meet electronically. This is a huge consequence of keeping the KingDumb Halls closed. It is a very, very important topic.
Okay, now I'm going to go on a rant because check this out. I was thinking about this last night. This is how it is going to what you're saying. Here we have the frickin' Romans are in your damn city. The frickin' Romans in your city, and now they've left. Everybody who's a Christian is leaving Jerusalem and getting the hell out of town. But guess what? There's a group of people that are saying, "Hey, we're not going to meet. We're not going to congregate. We're just going to meet in Zoom." Why? Because we can't talk about this shit. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if it's the end of the world. I don't know what it is. But there's major shit going down. You know, anybody that knows in 15 more days, the 50-year anniversary of the United States fiat standard with Nixon. They're talking about the debasement of the United States dollar. They're talking about supply chains breaking down. You see the lockdowns in other countries. You see what they're doing to the citizens in Australia and Canada. There's some major shit going down. You see what's happening in the Mexican border. Everyone is seeing things. And all I'm saying is that there's some major shit going down. And you know what that major shit is? The frickin' Romans are returning back to frickin' Jerusalem. And you assholes are listening to a bunch of people in New York City in a frickin' Zoom meeting. And that is a fucking recipe for disaster. That is a recipe for fucking death. So I'm not saying that it's going to be Armageddon and Jesus is going to come down and do whatever. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that we are in a major shift right now. Anybody who's anybody and smart and successful in this world has already talked about it. We are in the greatest fundamental transfer of wealth and power. It's called I think it's called the I forget the name. Is through the Thucydides trap. And what that is like 16 or very few times in world history where you have one world power that is emerging while the existing power falls down, like the United States and Great Britain and before that. So we're living in that moment where there's a major shift going to happen. I don't know what the world is going to look like. I'm positive about it all. But what I'm trying to say in my rant is that the Jehovah's Witnesses are in their Zoom meeting thinking that everything is hunky-dory. And they're being set up for the slaughter, in my opinion. Because they're not allowed to talk to other people in their congregation about what they're seeing in world events.
Now, the average Jehovah's Witness will defend it, going back to the health issue, that they're defending everybody's health. But listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
What's a faster way to kill yourself? COVID or an abortion? COVID or execution? There's quicker ways that'll kill you than COVID.
Correct.
Jehovah's Witnesses don't speak out on those quicker ways.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. In the 1974 yearbook, it was about Germany. Mm-hmm. The 1974 Jehovah's Witness yearbook. We read it over and over when we were kids. It was the German brothers. Mm-hmm. And the Germans and the Jehovah's Witnesses were so proud that they say nothing was going to hold them back from field service. And they would show all the clandestine field service, door to door, the door to door preaching work. How the Jehovah's Witnesses risked all these people's lives. Correct. And then I think the president of the German Society was Brother Balzerite. How he got this fellowship because he he worked with the Nazis to stop the preaching work.
Correct.
And Brother Rutherford personally disfellowshipped him. Yeah, it's all in the 1974 yearbook. Well, the Watchtower asked all these German citizens to go on a blitzkrieg to pass out flyers door to door and to all the government agencies at everybody's risk of death or concentration camp or death, execution, treason against the state. Tell me that's not more dangerous than COVID-19.
Yeah.
So here, Watchtower puts everybody's life at harm's way for a political move against the National Socialists in the 1940s. But they can't go to their corner book, you know, the Watchtower stand.
Correct.
They can't go door to door for COVID-19. I mean, it just seems that it's not a health issue. It's not a health issue. They put brothers' lives at risk during World War II in Germany and so many countries by their preaching work, clandestine preaching work. And they were proud of it. They said, we have clandestine preaching work. Well, they were putting all those brothers' lives at risk. But now in COVID-19, they don't. Something which is a lot less riskier. So I don't buy that health reason. If they were really worried about people's health, they wouldn't have asked the Germans to go door to door during the Nazi regime. If they were really worried about people's health, they wouldn't have asked the Germans to go door to door during the Nazi regime. If they were really worried about people's health, they wouldn't have asked the Germans to go door to door during the Nazi regime. You know, if they were really worried about people's health and welfare.
Yeah, if they were really worried about people's health, they'd be educating them about, you know, natural cures that are out there that'll help you fight spike proteins. But they won't talk about that. They don't care about people's health. They don't care about vitamin D. They don't care about with the zinc. They don't care about all these things. Vitamin C. They don't care. They don't care about people's health because they don't even talk about health. And there's a lot of information out there, pre-COVID and after COVID, that people are out there preaching health. So don't give me that shit that Watchtower cares about health. You know, not one damn article about health. Hey, real quick, there's a little quick fire round. Scientologyorg.
I just find it interesting. This has nothing to do with Scientologyorg. This has nothing to do with any church that has a .org. This is all about Watchtower. Watchtower refuses to use the word church, and they go to this ungodly, unspiritual word called organization, which is funny because the last part of organization is shun. I think it's real fitting. But so you have this word called organization, .org. And Jehovah's Witnesses are real meticulous. No, we're not going to be like the Catholics. We're not going to be like the Protestants. We're not going to use the word church. We're not going to use the word the Eucharist. And they go through all this labeling of words they can and cannot use in their organization. But then they call themselves the jW.org. And if you look at a lot of other religions are called .orgs. That sounds very similar. A lot of religions call themselves .orgs.
Correct.
Which sounds very much like Scientology.org or Catholicism.org or Mormonism.org. Anybody who uses a .org as their official website, but they can't use the word church.
And they can't use.
I just find that real interesting.
And they can't use the .us. Okay, fire round real quick. Billionaires right now are reportedly in Fiji and other islands in the Pacific. The really well-to-do, connected, are escaping into what Watchtower has, like a bunker, a Watchtower-type bunker. That's the report I see on some news agencies. What do you think about that? So you got the billionaires running away, and Watchtower also built a bunker. Is that a coincidence?
Well, no, because we talked about this years ago. What did they know? What did Jehovah's Witnesses know, and when did they know it? Before Donald Trump became president, you remember when they thought Hillary Clinton was going to win? Some reason they wanted to get the hell out of New York City. They were in a fury, a madhouse selling frenzy to get the hell out of New York City. They had been there 100 years since Russell's time. But they had to get out of New York City. and go into this paradise on earth up there in Wallkill. Why? Did they know something was going to happen? And they were always preaching about these gold bags. Were they in the know? Now you see a lot of preppers talking about going out. They're trying to get away from urban areas. What did Watchtower know, and when did they know?
Correct.
Are they part of the United Nations?
Last one. They are not selling all of their KingDumb Halls. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's very simple. In the last video, you talked about George Carlin says you're not a member of their club.
Correct.
I disagree with you in that I don't think Watchtower is a member of their club. I think that they're like that brother that I was telling you about, the nerd. Remember my brother Dover was a nerd?
Yeah.
Even the elders removed him. These were guys that in the 70s and 80s, they wore high waters.
Correct.
Remember in the 50s, if you watch a movie, the kids rolled up their Levi's jeans? But in the 70s, we made fun of them, called them high waters.
Yeah.
They were dorks. A lot of the Jehovah's Witnesses are dorks. Their leaders are dorks. They're like people they're like the little boy. The Jehovah's Witness elders are like little boys that play jacks. Remember when you were in school and all the kids were playing football or baseball or basketball? And then you look up on the hill and there's a little boy playing jacks with the girls?
That's a member of the governing body.
That's what the governing body is. They're not real men. They're nerds, and now they're going to do it to you. So they want to be part of this new world order, but they're not. They're nerds. They're not in with the billionaires. They're not in with the millionaires. They might know a little bit about it, but they're not part of the club either.
Yeah.
So they want to play both ways.
Correct.
They have, and people who mention that they're a corporation, it's true. They have a huge asset. They have an asset class. Remember in the Revelation book, they called themselves the John class?
Correct.
Well, they are also the asset class now. Because me and you, the ones who bought the KingDumb Halls and built the KingDumb Halls, we're not members of the asset class.
Correct.
They are.
Correct. Now,
so they're not going to sell the KingDumb Halls because they're sitting on millions and millions, maybe billions of dollars of property that they can make last forever.
Correct, and they strategically sold. That's just my opinion. They strategically sold their KingDumb Halls. They didn't need them. They could use the money somewhere else. But it was a strategic sell-off.
You got your commentators out there, your YouTube commentators, who say that jDubs.org is a business, and they make very strong points. It's a corporation. It's a business. If they're right, end game it. The governing body doesn't have a say in the business side either.
No. Well, Mike and Kim talk about that, and they say that the devil is in the details of the Pennsylvania corporation because they're the ones that own, and they have to answer to the Pennsylvania corporation, and it's not owned by Jehovah's Witnesses.
Which would make sense, but there too then is a power struggle right there. Just like in the local elder body, there's power to get to the top. Then even the governing body has a lot of power struggles.
Yeah, because they're fighting.
Yeah, they got to fight with the shareholders. You know, so there's a lot of power struggle in that religion. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why the
It's
best.
not a religion. In that organization.
Yeah, and that's we know Jehovah's Witnesses are not Babylon the Great, but the counsel and the warning is still the right one. Get the hell out of her. Get the hell out of her. Get the hell out of her.
What I hate about the young Jehovah's Witnesses, and when I say young, I say the ones that under 30, 35. And on social media, when you post something or in a video, they always write, if you don't like it, why do you, so you'll get a new Jehovah's Witness who's barely been in there 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And they're trying to tell a 50-year-old, 60-year-old person who's been 50, 60-year-old, 1, 2 generations in, why do you care? And I always tell them, you knocked on my door, bitch. You knocked on my mom's door. You enslaved us. It's our duty. It's our duty. You knocked on our door. Anyways, they started the conversation. They started the debate. They started the argument. We're finishing it.
Correct.
There's like a mixed martial arts. There's this new fighting. And can you imagine a champion of a mixed martial arts? He goes, okay, this is the new rules. You have to tie your hands behind your back and your feet, and I get to fight you. That's what these new Jehovah's Witnesses want to do. They're cowardless. They don't want you to talk back. They want to knock on your door. They want to write you letters. They want to call you on the phone. But we're not supposed to talk back.
Yeah, in
No,
America.
You called me, bitch. You wrote me a letter.
Yeah.
You knocked on my door.
No.
Want to start the conversation, but they don't want you to respond.
Yeah.
And here it goes again. They're not a Christian organization. They're not a Christian religion.
Correct.
Because Christians have always thought, in the first century Christian church, when they went to house, it was open to the public. So when a brother or a sister opened his house, he opened it up to the neighbors. And they would do this tradition called breaking the bread.
Correct.
They actually ate like a family. And everybody was expected to say something about the scripture, about the word,
Correct.
about the letters of the apostles, but they ate in a dinner like a family. That means that there was disagreements, they talked back and forth, and they hammered things out. With Jehovah's Witnesses, there's none of that going on now that the KingDumb Halls are closed. There is no talking.
And you know what?
In other words, the Jehovah's Witnesses are a factory for atheists and apostates. They make the apostates. They make the atheists.
Correct.
I mean, they should be embarrassed. Jehovah's Witnesses should be embarrassed. Let's say you're a shoe factory. You're a shoe factory, and you say, "Hey, I do shoes," and you come out at the store. The guy orders 1,000 shoes, and he gets 1,000 socks. Well, he's going to call the manager and go, "Hey, I ordered 1,000 shoes, and you gave me 1,000 socks." I know, but that's all we're putting out right now. Well, the Jehovah's Witnesses are the same. They call themselves the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and if you look at YouTube, all they do is put out atheists.
Yeah, they produce atheists. Yeah. And hold on a second, and check this one out. I forget if it's Australia or if it's England, but they actually admitted, government officials admitted that they don't want you going to protest. They don't want you going to the grocery store because they don't want you talking to your neighbor because you might get misinformation about whatever the topic of the day is. And that's the same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses. They don't want you going to the KingDumb Hall because you're going to stick around after the meeting, you're going to talk, and everybody in the KingDumb Hall is going to have an opinion about the vaccine, and everyone's going to have an opinion about the mask and everything else.
It's going to show that it's a house divided.
It's a house divided.
Yeah, which is okay. That's the way it should be. There should be open, but they can't. They can't admit that Jehovah's house is divided. There's nothing wrong in them being divided. People who want the vaccine should get the vaccine, and people who don't should. But there should be freedom, at least freedom of expression, freedom of thought. Jehovah's Witnesses don't want that, and that's the reason the KingDumb Halls are closed. Because people are going to talk. They can't. Jehovah's Witnesses cannot have freedom. Freedom and Jehovah's Witnesses are not synonymous. They are not synonymous. The short answer is, it's a real simple answer. They don't want people at the KingDumb Hall. That's all it is. They don't want people at the KingDumb Hall talking.
Correct. They don't want people talking.
They're not a religion. They're not a religion.
They're an organization.
They're an organization. Yeah. Okay, good work.
Okay.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.